I'd like to call to order the Ravenna School District Board of Education meeting for May 18th, 2020.
Roll call, Mr. Mike Wisniewski.
Here.
Mr. Roger Bolts.
Present.
Mrs. Pamela Calhoun.
Here.
Mrs. Joanne Seaman.
Here.
Mr. Mike Tonamonia.
Yes.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I can have a moment of silence, please. Any additions or corrections to the agenda?
I have none. And I have none as well. All right, may I have a motion for approval of the agenda, please?
Second.
Mr. Bolts?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Tonamonia?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Thank you. There were no emailed questions in, so we do not have any recognition of the public or for either the agenda or non-agenda item sections. So we will move on to reports of the board from Maplewood and Mrs. Seaman.
We do not have our meeting until Thursday, so I don't have a big report, but I do have the names of the seniors and juniors who have made the honor roll. They are David Alt and Brianna Boyd, and they both have 4 points. Colton Kleitz, Julia Copen, Kendra Daniels, Shannon Eaton, Seth Harold, Zachary Heffley, Logan Hulaf, Stephen Luthby, and he also has a 4 point. Anthony McGinnis, Seth Randolph, and James Warner. Those are the seniors. And then the juniors are Scott Bacon, Faith Castellon, Brandon Gear, Dax Parsons, Brianne Rambler, Dylan Ritchie, Ezekiel Stratton, and Alexa Talcott. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Seaman. And I will ask you to email me that list so we can make sure we include those names in our minutes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item will be the reports of the treasurer. We will be doing consent agendas after each section, so we will go through all items, and then I will ask for a motion to approve, and then the roll call. But before we do that, when I get through all the items, I will give a quick presentation on the 5-year forecast before we do that. So item number 1 will be the approval of the minutes. Recommend that the Board of Education approve the meeting minutes from the April 27th, 2020 business meeting. Our gifts and donations, you can see the list there in your agenda, and those are as presented. Item number 3 is financial reports. We have our normal reports, the monthly operating reports, financial cash summaries, monthly warrant checklist, and our bank reconciliations. Item number 4, we have a certificate of certification of payment. What happened here on this one, we got out of order on our invoice date and our PO date, and it was due to an overpayment that we weren't expecting. It was for EA, Educational Alternatives. So we went ahead and issued the check to them, and then we're just asking for approval because it is over my certification limit of $3,000. Item number 5 is our approval of transfers. So we are transferring some funds that we have in a couple different locations. So we have our 22 fund, which we use for either stale checks or we use it for our tournaments when we host tournaments here through OHSAA. So we're going to be transferring some of the leftover money from that to the athletic fund, first to the general fund, then the athletic fund, and then we're also transferring out the stale checks that meet the date requirements. We are moving a little bit of money from our stadium fundraiser to our debt service because payment is due. Also doing the same thing out of the PI fund, and then we are making another payment out of the PI fund. So those 5 transfers are listed there. Item number 6, we have recommend that we approve the amended permanent appropriations for fiscal year 2020. And again, that's just to line up with the changes that we have in our transfer list. Number 7, we are returning in advance. So at the beginning of the year, we asked you to advance some funds to help cover some shortfalls in our food service. And we're pleased to announce that at this time we are able to pay that back. And we're hoping if things continue on the current track, when we get into next year, we don't think we're going to have to advance any funds in the food service to start out the year. They are starting to become very solvent due to the hard work of Miss Tonamonia, and we're in real nice position right now with that fund. And then item number 8 is I will ask for approval of the May submission of the 2020 forecast. And at this time, I will take a couple minutes to kind of go over some of the highlights. So this first slide that I have here is just showing you an overall picture on the 5-year forecast from the current year, one previous year, 2019, and then our current fiscal year, 2020, and then our next 4 projected years. If you remember correctly, when we were in the October filing, that number on the bottom right was about $11.5 million. Yes, it is still a negative number at this point in time, but currently with some of our reorganization and some savings we're going to be able to recognize, right now it is at a deficit of $5.325 million. So we have been able to improve our status on the final right number by about $6 million. We still have a lot of things that are in question right now, and I'll go through some of the highlights of that here in the next few slides. This is just a breakdown of where our revenue sources are. State funding for us in 2019 was 52.5%. By the end of the forecast, we're projecting it to be right around 57%. Real estate is our next largest item. In 2019, it was 29.5%. It will go up to about 30.2% on projections at the end of the forecast in 24. And then all other sources will be additional about 10% there, and those are going to remain roughly the same. So total revenues, as we look through the forecast, this is everything. So this would be the bottom line of the revenues on the actual forecast. In 2020, we're still projecting about 2.249, and we're going to stay relatively consistent between 28.5 and just over $30 million in revenues. So right here, I've kind of summarized, and this is the same stuff that I sent out to you earlier over the weekend. I think it was on Friday when I sent this out. Just kind of giving you a brief overview of what we're looking at. Right now, in the current forecast, I have modeled the $431,000 reduction that we are going to see as part of the governor's cuts due to their response from all the COVID-19 stuff that is going on. And that is going to take place starting in our upcoming payment. I believe it is this Friday, and then our 2 payments in June. So that is a hit, but overall, I mean, it's a large portion of what's left, but in the overall scheme of things, it was about 3% of our total that we get from the state. Also going forward, I'm modeling right now a 2% reduction in state aid for next year. And there's been a lot of conversations that we've had in regards to this with different treasurers. I've been listening to different webinars. And right now, I kind of am taking the stance of don't try to project what I don't know yet. I am realizing that we are going to have some reductions. We don't have any idea what those reductions are going to be. And in our current budget, I didn't want to get too far down the road until I know a little bit more information. So right now, our budget can kind of handle 2%. And then once we know what they actually are, we'll sit down and reconvene. But for next year, I'm modeling 2% reduction. And then beyond that, I've taken everything back up to our levels at November. Again, just not enough information to be able to tell what's going on yet. Also am showing about a 2 to 2.5% reduction in, I should say 2 to 2.5% increase in tax delinquencies, meaning then our collections will go down. And again, a lot of information yet to be known. So as we know what's going to happen, we will disseminate that information to you. But the one thing to keep in mind with tax collections, the biggest collection is the one in the first part of the year. So that January tax collection, a lot of people pay for the entire year. So whatever hit we do get, it will be from what's coming in, people who pay either on a monthly basis through escrow or people who choose to pay their taxes on the halves. But we have seen normal collections did happen in January and February. As I said, I've taken everything else back up to November projected numbers for fiscal years 22, 23, and 24. Until we know more information, which will be sometime over the summer and into the fall, then we'll adjust those numbers accordingly. And then the last thing is we are going to be receiving some money through the CARES Act. It is not going to come directly into the general fund. It is going to come through a state or a federal fund. We are slated right now to receive $650,000. So that is offsetting our loss from the state, and we're going to be ahead a little bit by $220,000. So that is helping right now. And the way that they calculated that was they used our Title I formulas. So we do have some quite a few kids that qualify for that. So that did help us out a little bit to receive some additional funding to help us offset what we're losing. All right, expenditures real quick. Obviously, the biggest thing for us is salaries, and it is going to stay, in that 48 to 50% range. And then benefits and purchase services are in that or low 20% range. And then everything else makes up that final handful of percentage points to round out the budget. Go back. So total expenditures right now for FY20, we're looking at 30.287. For 21, 29.8, and we're staying somewhere in the 31 to 30, just under $33 million as we look through the remainder of the forecast. Salaries right now are projected to be in the, I think I grabbed the wrong slide on that one, but they will be in the about the $15 million range. They are going to vary a little bit. I did make a change in the when I'm going to model the CARE Act money coming in. If we needed to, we could take advantage of it in this current fiscal year, but due to the timing and everything with what we've got going on, I think it was better to go ahead and make that switch and just realize that money coming in the next fiscal year. That's the change that I made, and I emailed it out to you this morning. So really all that's doing is shifting the savings from current fiscal year of about $600,000 in salaries to next fiscal year. So benefits is going to stay between 6.9 and about $8.4 million as we go through the forecast. And then our purchase services will be roughly about the same, 6.8 for this current year, going up to about $7.6 million as we go through the forecast. Some of the highlights, I am modeling the $600,000 of salary offset in fiscal year 21, as well as about $50,000 of supplies, because we are going to be buying a lot of things to kind of combat what's going on with COVID-19. We do not know what school's going to look like when we open up again in the fall. So there's a lot of requirements that we're going to have to, different things we're going to have to get and spend some funds on, give some to the supplies. Right now, I am modeling about an additional $130,000 of savings due to not having overtime, extra trips. We did reduce some of our supplementals for the spring. So, based on what I've seen right now, we are realizing some year-over-year savings when I look at April and May in terms of extra hours and bus trips and things of that nature. In FY21, I am modeling our reductions of our reorganization plan, the loss of 1 administrator, 7.2 teachers, and approximately 7 classified staff. And then as we move through the forecast, we are modeling the loss of 2 certified staff members and 2 classified as we try to combat, our declining enrollment and declining cash balances. And hopefully we will be able to do most of that through attrition. So as we get retirements or people choosing to go to a different district or something of that nature, we will try to do it through non-replacement other than through a RIF. And then the other thing to kind of stabilize things where we're at right now, I am currently modeling in FY22 a freeze in our steps and our columns to kind of help stabilize the budget. Now, just because I have it modeled in that current fiscal year does not mean it will come to fruition. We're still about 18 months away from that happening, but Mr. Honkel and I were really working hard to try to get to a positive year 3 balance, and that was one of the things that really helped us out. Also, in this particular forecast, we've got next year, we're only going to have a 3.85% increase in our benefits. 0%, and that's for our medical, 0% in our dental, and we will get 2 holidays. And then as we go forward, I'm using between 7 and 7.5% on medical and 3 to 4% for dental. And then I am showing 2 holidays for fiscal year 22, 1 holiday for 23 and 24. And then I am showing a few other reductions in purchase services and supplies and things of that nature due to some of our inactivity and kind of having to look at how we can tighten our budget as we go forward with the 5-year forecast. A couple other things just to remind you of. The results of our performance audit kind of did validate what we were talking about with the reorganization plan. We had gone over that last month with the auditors. We still have some challenging times and tough decisions that we're going to have to be made as we move forward. We don't know a lot of information right now, and we're just going to have to work through that as a team, our admin team, and as a district to try to get through all that. But as we get more information on what's going to be happening in terms of finances, we will get that information out to everyone. And I think that is the end of the presentation. Any questions for me as of right now? Yes?
The money that was taken away because of the virus for this next period of time, what budget does that come out of? When is that?
Okay, so the question was, Mr. Tonamonia asked about the current cuts that Governor DeWine has made. That is basically coming out of our state funding, our state foundation that is one of our main sources of income for the general fund. So they will be making those cuts over, we have 3 more payments remaining in this fiscal year. So for us, they're going to be, so that $430,000, that's going to be roughly about $150,000, about $140,000 per payment that we will be reduced. So all 600 plus school districts in the state of Ohio are realizing the same thing. And they did take into account your state share index or your poverty level as they were doing it. So the schools that were lower, had lower state share indexes did end up realizing a little bit more of a cut. Ones that had a higher state share index, like where we're at, their cuts were not quite as severe.
So you say 3 more payments to go at 3.
Yeah, so about $130,000 to $140,000 per payment.
Do you know when the care money will come in?
If we really needed to, we would be able to start drawing it down this current fiscal year. But with all the stuff that we're going on, and at the end of this year, our balance is still going to be okay. So I decided instead of trying to take the money now, whether we take it in June or take it in July, it's just a difference of is it this current fiscal year or next fiscal year. At the end of the day, we're still going to save $600,000, hopefully for salaries, and about $50,000 for supplies. So we'll start to realize that over the summer and into the fall. Good questions? Other questions? Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the treasurer's agenda?
So moved.
Before you vote, I did have another question,
Yes, sir.
and I wasn't quick enough. Who is the Ohio Mask Makers Medical Sewing? Are they connected? Did you make those, Dennis? Those
Yeah,
masks?
so a couple of our employees, Heidi Kovach, our library aide over at West Main, Gail Sudo, our attendance secretary here at the high school, and one of our ACE substitute secretaries, Barb Ross. Barb actually reached out to me and asked if we could use any masks, and I said absolutely. She described them to me, and I said, yeah, that'd be wonderful, as many as you could get. So they started us off with 400. They delivered those last week. We have 50 at the board office. We brought 50 for graduation in case anybody got uncomfortable and needed a mask. And then Mr. York has the other 300 for our employees if they so choose. Now, he's also got 8,000 masks. Yeah, so we're in pretty good shape with that. But I just thought that was a very generous donation.
Awesome.
Very thoughtful. They're cloth masks, so they're reusable. You know, obviously just one per person, but they wash up nicely, dry out nicely. Just a
Very nice.
perfect example of people banding together and doing what's necessary and the right things. And then I might as well comment as well as, you know, the other generous donations from folks with regards to our food program, our high school graduation. People have donated to that to make sure that those activities are done in an acceptable and a classy manner for our class of 2020 graduates. So those are all noticed and appreciated, from the smallest of donation to the larger donations. Everything counts and everything's appreciated. And once again, just shows the spirit of the Ravenna community, stepping up and standing behind its children. Thank you to everyone.
Very generous.
Any other questions? Okay, Mrs. Calhoun? Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Tonomonia?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Bolts? Thank you.
Thank you. Number 10 is a presentation from Mr. Rivlin on the Zahner Blauser handwriting winners. We did not want to not do that since it's a yearly tradition. So I appreciate Mr. Rivlin pulling the elementary principals together and those folks together so that we could honor these students in the tradition that we have. So, Mr. Rivlin.
Thank you. So each year, as you have all heard in years past, we've done the Zahner Blauser handwriting contest. We rate it based on grades 1 through 5. Each building does their own. The teachers pick the winners based off of certain standards: slant, spacing, neatness, and then they bring it to the principals, and the principals vote on the winners from each building for one district winner. Excuse me. Each year they have to write one sentence. It's the lazy fox jumped over the brown dog, and the reason that they use that sentence is it includes every single letter in our alphabet. So they have to write each one of those. First and second grade are print or manuscript, and then cursive for third, fourth, and fifth. And then they also have to write a sentence that says why writing is important to them. And a lot of times it says, so people can read it, so people can understand what I'm trying to communicate. Each year we have these winners. Unfortunately, we typically would have them here and present them with a certificate. Due to the times we're in right now, I wanted to make sure we recognized each one of those students. So I'm just going to read those names as we go along, and certificates have been printed and mailed home to those parents and students so that they can receive those. So our first grade winner is Lucy Tate from Williard. Second grade is Fallon Goodman from Carlin. Third grade is Jocelyn Duquette from Carlin. Fourth grade is Seth Ashley from West Main. And our fifth grade winner this year is Casey Sturba from Carlin. So I'd like to congratulate each one of those students and families. It's a big honor, great honor. We obviously send those on to the state competition. It's been a while since we've had a state winner, but hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that one of these students gets through to get that recognition.
So thank you for your work on that, as well as with the elementary administrators and the teachers. So last week, we mailed a certificate with a nice little handwritten note from me, as well as the link to the meeting tonight so that they could hear their child being recognized. So hopefully we have some of those folks tuning in so that they do get that recognition. So we are very proud of their penmanship and their work and taking that seriousness. And then once again, thank you for organizing that and making sure that we continue that tradition.
Absolutely.
Number 11, the letter A. Number 11 are reports and recommendations to the superintendent and other administrators. The letter A are business recommendations. Number 1 is to approve the second reading for new board policies. Number 2, to approve a service agreement. Number 3 is a service agreement. Number 4, to approve the qualifying seniors for graduation. Number 5 and 6 are memorandums of understandings with our teachers union. And number 7, our handbook changes. If I could get a motion in a second, then I could talk about each one, please.
Second.
Thank you. Number 1, I'm going to defer to Mr. Ravenna. This is part 2 of our policies from last month. We did do the lion's share last month, but we still had a couple more that we needed to have that second reading and some adjustments to make sure that we're compliant as we finish the fiscal year and get prepared to enter into the next school year. Mr. Ravenna.
Thank you. There are 2 policies. Policy 4124, which is our employment contracts. This is the second reading. As you remember from last month, we did have this policy in place and it hasn't been revised since 1994. So we have deleted the entire policy and rewrote it into this one. You also have a link on your agenda, basically talking about how contracts will go into through the bargaining unit, and that for classified it would be a probationary period as we have currently. And then it also talks about how the board requires protection of the district of classified members, that every new employed person in a classified position, including regularly hourly rates and per diem classified staff, sign an initial employment contract. It's not a lot of changes from what we've had in the past, other than cleaning up the language and rewriting that. The other policy is new. It's 5460.02, and this is students at risk of not qualifying for high school diploma. This goes along with the new graduation requirements. Last month we approved a revision to graduating seniors and diplomas. This talks about the students that are at risk and how we identify those students and what interventions we would put in place to make sure that they are graduating on time. And both of those are attached in your agenda for review if you need those. Any questions on those?
Thank you. Number 2 was to approve a service agreement with the Summit Educational Service Center, and this is for extended school year for a student should we actually have the extended ESY services. We're not exactly sure what that looks like, but that would be as needed. Same with number 3 with the Summit Educational Service Center. This is actually for the 2021 school year for a few students as well as an educational aid. Once again, this will be as needed, and we'll see what everything looks like here in the next couple months. Number 4 is to approve the qualifying seniors for graduation. Those have been recommended to you and in your backup materials. Number 5 is a memorandum of understanding with the teachers union that talks about the conditions of House Bill 197 that was passed early in March, encouraging school districts and teachers unions to get together to work out an evaluation system, essentially so that 3/4 of the year was not lost with regards to evaluations and for teachers. So we were able to get together with the teachers union, come to an agreement there to make sure that everybody was evaluated properly and in accordance with our master agreement as well as the law. And number 6 was a memorandum of understanding with regards to our supplemental pays for both the full school year pays as well as the spring supplementals. Once again, it was encouraged to get together with our folks and come to an agreement to agree on what was fair with regards to those percentages and those numbers. It's a little tricky with the spring sports because we had a little bit less than a third of the season. So we knew that we had to honor the work that had been done, but by the same token, when we're cutting over $1 million and we're cutting teachers, it was a little difficult to pay the full amount for work that was not completed. So we were able to come up to agreement on that. And then number 7, some changes to the parent-student handbook and the code of conduct. Those were in your backup materials. The only notation on that was that at the last minute we incorporated what we believe to be our bus schedule this upcoming year. So we're still working with our transportation supervisor and our software program to get the most effective and efficient bus routes, which of course is going to drive those start and stop times. So I can answer any questions on any of those topics.
All right. Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Tonomonio?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Bolts? Mrs. Calhoun?
Thank you. Number 12, our personnel considerations, letter A, are certificated, and those are as listed. Those are resignations as well as employment contracts. And then the letter B are classified. Number 1 is a reduction in force. I've discussed with the board for the last several months about the library aide position at Carlin Elementary School. So once again, we had saved the position in the organization. So although somebody's not going to be where they were last year, at the end of the day, with regards to their aide position, nobody will lose their job as a result of that. And then numbers 2 and 3 are employment for summer custodial help as well as substitutes. I have a motion. Second on that, please. And I can answer any specific questions. Don't believe we needed to take anything out.
No questions? All right. Mr. Tonomonio?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Bolts? Mrs. Calhoun? Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Thank you. Number 13 is the recognition of public. We did not have anybody sign up. Thank you to Mr. Newcomb for facilitating that. Number 14, informational items, graduation. We had videotaped our senior speeches and congratulatory remarks from school board members. Thank you to those of you that participated in that, from our mayor, as well as the speeches from valedictorian, salutatorian, the high school principal, myself. And then on Thursday, we had 130 out of our 154 graduating seniors went across the stage in their cap and gown, got videotaped, and then got pictures taken with their parents. We had a couple other, we had a professional photographer here for anybody that wanted to purchase pictures, and a couple other stations. So we're very, very pleased with that outcome, and we're excited to see the net result, which will be Monday, May 26th, 9:20 p.m. at the Midway Drive-In. So Mrs. Coleman has communicated that out to the seniors in particular. I've sent that out to all of our staff as well as the board members, and it's on our social media, and we'll blast it again over the Memorial Day weekend to make sure that everybody's well aware of that. And then the last culminating event is our pizza parade, which is scheduled to take place Monday, Memorial Day, May 25th, 5 p.m. We actually had about 109 takers out of the 130 graduates that want to participate in this. So they'll line up with their cars and their signs, and they'll be able to paint their cars and have their signs at the high school here. Officer Staple will lead them around town. We've got a nice little short but sufficient parade route for them. they'll be able to go down the lion's share of Main Street. They're going out at Chestnut, left on Highland, right on Linden, all the way up Main Street. So we'll be able to get the businesses and perhaps some relatives and other folks that can't be in the car with them down to Oakwood, across Oakwood, up Highland, and then back down to Chestnut. When they get back to the high school here, I'm going to purchase a pizza for every student, and we also have a nice sign for them that we'll give to them, get a nice photo op, and we'll wish all of them well for their graduation for 2020. So we're excited that we're able to pull that together. Lots of credit to Mrs. Coleman and her administrative team, talking with the senior student leadership ahead of time, brainstorming, getting some input, and then coming back and putting a plan together. So very, very proud of all of that. So many, many thanks to them for that. Our next school board meeting is Monday, June 29th, 5 p.m. at Ravenna High School. I'd like to have it here in this format unless something drastically changes. Something is likely going to happen with regards to the stay-at-home order and the stay-safe order on and about May 29th. So we'll just kind of take our cues from our state government with regards to that. And then one other notation, we generally do not have a regular scheduled July meeting, but for whatever reason, if you recall, I had asked if we could do that in July, and you folks agreed. So we do have a regularly scheduled July board meeting, which will be Monday, July 27th. Same concept, I'd like to have it here. Of course, we'll take our cues and go from there. So we'll be able to conduct business, and we won't have to have special meetings that we generally do for personnel and little odds and ends. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to take care of our regular business during those regular board business meetings. Any questions, comments, anything information-wise, additional? Okay, I do have need for executive session, number 15. So executive session or private session of the school board is controlled by the Sunshine Law and may only be used for the special purposes outlined in the law. No action can be taken by the Board of Education during executive session. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22, the letter G, 1 and 5, it is hereby moved that the Board of Education adjourn to executive session to consider employment of public employees and matters to be kept confidential by law.
Second.
And there will not be any action after executive session, and I promise to keep you less than a half hour. All right, Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Bolts? Mrs. Calhoun? Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Tonomonia?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you to everyone. Good evening.
Okay.